Oh, for the love.
Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved.
From the middle after dark over here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for episode 51 of From the Middle. We are three middle-class guys in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives, with a point of view that's somewhere in the middle. We do have a very special guest with us today, which I'm very excited about. But before that, if you've never tuned into our podcast before, we're just three guys who like to talk entertainment, culture, and whatever's on our mind, usually not that serious. So don't take us seriously, because we certainly don't. But our guest today is a very, very special guest. I'm so excited because we haven't catched up in a long time. It's Corey and I's dear cousin, Kristin. And this is on our dad's side of the family. We're very excited to have you.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks for spending time with us, Dr. Schafer.
Oh, certainly, certainly.
So since Corey did a very nice tee up there, Kristin, just really quickly, tell us a little bit about your credentials or your background.
All right. Well, I'm from Lafayette, which you guys know where that is, of course. I am a doctor, probably a name only, but yeah, I am a doctor, and then I'm a captain in the U.S. Air Force, and that's about all the letters I have behind my name right now.
So how many letters is that total?
I don't know. If you include my undergrad degree, maybe 6. I don't know. Too many.
All right, way more than I have. Got it. So you outrank us all. Well, fantastic. This is so fun. So Lafayette, Ohio is where you grew up. We grew up in Ada, Ohio. We've introduced at least our listeners to that. So very small towns in Northwest rural Ohio. For anybody that's not familiar or who might be jumping in later in all of our episodes that we've done, since this is 51. But we were excited to have you on because you just have a very different background from us professionally, but you're from a very similar place. Part of our show is we're from the middle of America, and we're just kind of normal people. We're not celebrities. We're not professional athletes. We're not anything crazy like that. But we're just kind of normal, average, middle-class people, and we just like to talk about what we like to talk about. And so I'm so glad that you could come on. So one of my first questions, and feel free to jump in with any funny stories along the way. You can tell embarrassing ones about us from our childhood if you remember any that you want to share. But one of my questions first, because we always talk about professions first, when frankly that might not be what people enjoy the most. Outside of being very, very busy with a bunch of letters after your name, what do you like to do for fun?
Pretty much anything outdoors. I'm a very outdoorsy person. So hiking, fishing, kayaking, anything with outdoor travel. So yeah, as much sun as is humanly possible.
Yeah. Building super nice outdoor patios, as we've seen recently on social media.
Before I did that, I would have called it a hobby, but now I don't know. It was exhausting.
Yeah. Lots of trips to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, or did you have everything that you needed and you just threw it together?
I've been there every weekend. There's one worker there in particular that kind of gives me like the side eye every time I go in, like, oh man, you again. So, no.
Okay. So everything outdoors, anything indoors if you're not outdoors and not at work?
I like cooking, baking, eating.
Yes. Wow. We could go on about that for a while. Fantastic. So my first question really, and Kendall and Corey, you guys can jump in anytime. That's really fine. I'm not running the whole show. But my first question, we obviously grew up really close to one another geographically. Have you spent any time kind of looking back on, like, obviously you love outdoors, what that time was like growing up where you did? I mean, it was, 10 minutes from where we grew up. So, how much of your background, how much of growing up where you did factored into who you are now? I mean, we've talked a lot about that on the podcast so far. There's a certain blend of humble roots, but appreciating the city and some of the culture that Columbus might have to offer. It's not like we live in Paris or London, but like, there's a little more culture here and things than where we grew up. Like, speak to that at all. Just, what was it like? Do you look back fondly on your childhood and where you grew up?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think coming from kind of a family of farmers, you sort of get that work ethic early. And I was outside all the time, either with grandparents or, the ridiculous amount of animals that we had, or mom and dad. So no, I think we were, both Heather and I, obviously Heather's my sister, but I think we were ridiculously lucky growing up, especially just having like the apple orchard, and we had a pond behind our house. That's just not something a lot of kids can say they got to experience. So no, it was great.
Yeah. I'm
so glad you spoke to that, because like that's one of the things I remember most coming over and visiting you guys. I mean, your house for many years was literally a barn that you remodeled into this beautiful home with like huge cast iron fireplaces and herbs hanging in the kitchen from the ceiling. And like, I think your grandparents lived right next door, right? So like we would go down and visit them, and there were goats and chickens. And I have this sort of probably idealistic view of visiting this pioneer homesteading type of little quadrant in the woods that was you guys' own. And it was like very, I don't know, there was something very special about visiting that place and hanging out with you guys there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit cult-like in a way, because I mean, we live right on the corner, and then mom and grandpa are right beside us, and then an aunt and uncle obviously behind. But no, it's great, and there's so much of that you don't realize how sort of self-sufficient we were on that corner. I mean, grandpa had that huge vegetable garden, we had the apple orchard. There's really not a whole lot that dad or any of the uncles couldn't really do as far as handiwork. But no, it was great. It's not as idealistic as or it's more idealistic probably than you would think.
And the work ethic is certainly something that I think, just observing you, I mean, it's been too long since we've caught up, but like, that's very much something I would attribute to you, your work ethic. Like, not just because it feels like you've been in school for 106 years.
Entire life.
But like the fact that you're just willing to take on big home projects, and you're like, well, I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure it out, and I'm just going to get my hands dirty and dive in. Like, that's something that is very you and very your family. And so, I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
One thing that I've always, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, whatever you were going to say.
One thing that I've always found interesting too is the different cultures and people who grow up in a certain culture and have assumptions about people in a different one. So specifically right now we're talking about city versus rural, right? And what was your, so like coming out of high school, did you went, I'm assuming you have an undergrad, you went to college after high school, and then Air Force came after that. And
Yep.
That would be my guess. And then grad school after that.
Yep.
Right. Was there a point, whether college or Air Force or anything like that, where you feel like you got to kind of like taste and understand other people a little bit better than you thought you did, or any experiences like that?
Yeah, I think, so undergrad was obviously just in Lima, which is really pretty close to Lafayette. So, and then I went to Ohio State for undergrad, which really wasn't too much of a culture shock, a lot more people, but I don't know that I would say that it was too much. The Air Force for sure was a culture shock for multiple reasons, but got to meet a lot of people from around the country, and now they're deployed all over. So I kind of get to experience through their eyes other cultures in that way. I've got friends that have been in Germany, one's been in Guam, and yeah.
That's an interesting social feed as you scroll through and see updates on where people are and what people are doing.
Yeah. All of them seem to be having a better time than me in school. So
yeah, well, I don't know, better time. There's better time temporarily, perhaps.
yeah.
That's really funny. Was there something, because part of what I love about the podcast, I sort of have to remove myself out of my own body and head when I listen sometimes, and just realize, as we're discussing it, people grew up very, very differently than we did. Not better or worse necessarily. It's just very different. And so I'm much more aware as I talk about things on the podcast of how different that might be to some people. And we've had other guests who've had similar moments. was there something, a lot of people from where we came from stay in the area and work in the area in Northwest Ohio.
Yeah.
Every now and then some people leave to go to school somewhere and to do a job, but most people hang out around the area. It's not bad. It's not wrong. I'm not being critical of it at all. It's perfectly valid. Was there a moment or something in like junior high, high school, sometime in there that you knew, like, did you know college and then military? Did you just know, like, I'm just going to go to Ohio State? I mean, what was that like? Because Corey shared some of his background artistically, like he wanted to go to art school. He knew. What was that like for you?
Pretty much until I was through high school, I pretty much knew I wanted to go to Ohio State. That was mostly just a financial thing. I mean, you're in state, so tuition's a lot cheaper. So that wasn't really me trying to stretch it all. It was just a money issue. But no, I'd say at the very end of undergrad, actually the plan all the way up through undergrad had been to be a veterinarian, and that changed my senior year of undergrad. I don't know that there was really ever a moment that clicked. 9/11 happened, and that had sort of sparked the whole military interest. I'd never really acted on it. And then at the very end of undergrad, I just kept thinking about it. I was like, this is something, if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it. The idea terrified me. When the recruiter called me, I spent about a week crying intermittently to my parents, like, oh, I'm going to be shot. I'm going to die in a desert somewhere. But no, and still even going to like officer training, it scared me to death. But no, it was a good decision. And I think I forced myself to do something I wasn't comfortable with, and it turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in the crossroads moments, if you will, that sort of shape people's decision making and the path that they end up going down. Like, even watching you as a little kid, I thought for sure this little girl is going to be a vet. Like, so what was the moment where, you shifted your focus from that to, you did say 9/11 with the military, but then to end up where you are and what you're doing today, like, can you look back, and some of this is for posterity's sake, like for us to be able to look back and try to define what were those, if you think about the bumpers in bowling, right? Like, what were some of those moments that kept me from going another direction? And I'll put a more pointed, a finer point on it than Dylan would. Some people just want to get out of that small town environment, and they look at people who were able to get out and make a living as a success story. And, like, you got out of here. How did you do it? So have you been able to look back and sort of pinpoint moments like, oh, that was shaping, or it was clear that I didn't want to do veterinary pursuits because of this, or any of that? Can you speak to any of that?
There were a couple of things. Like I said, 9/11 sort of sparked the whole thing. Any of the natural disasters that would happen, like the Katrinas, anything like that, it bugged me that there were people going to help, and that I would have skills as a veterinarian to help. That would be great, but it bugged me that I could go to something like that and not be able to help people. I had a friend in a high school sport that got hurt, and kind of watching the doctors help her out. It's like, okay, I want to be able to do that. I love animals still. I like them more as a hobby. I think I would get sick of just sitting in a clinic all day doing spays and neuters. So it turned out well, but no, it's just stuff like that. Just little incidents of, I don't have the skills to help people, and that bothered me.
That's such a simple, beautiful, like, realization that you had. Like, I want to be able to help people. Like, animals are great, but if I do these relief effort things or want to go help in times of trouble, like, I want to be able to help people. And
yeah,
like, that kind of moves you from one category to another.
It definitely did. And it shocked everyone, including myself. So.
Yeah, I thought for sure, like, and it's one of those things where you could go, every little kid loves animals. There are a few people that you're like, oh my gosh, this kid has a connection with little critters and animals. And you were one of those people. My oldest, Lily, is that way. Like, she's 13, and her connection with animals is like, we've already looked into like zoo internships, or can she just do little like help feed animals during a summer program or something. But you certainly had that, and that was something I definitely remember growing up. It's super interesting.
So before we jump into why the Air Force, I remembered as a kid, in jealous in the best kind of way, at your Disney VHS collection that your household had. And I had to mention, there's lots of cuckoo clocks, I remember that, but also a very large Disney VHS collection. And Corey and I frequently discuss our love of most things Disney. So I have to ask, not necessarily do you still have the VHS collection, although I'm sure it's there in a hutch somewhere. Do you still enjoy all things Disney? Do you still follow along any of that? You're outdoors a ton and you're at work a ton. Are you still following anything Disney at this point?
I absolutely love Disney. I am a proud Disney Plus subscriber because I can't get enough of it. Any new Pixar that comes out, I still go see it along with all the tiny children. It's fine. I'm not ashamed.
Yeah.
Ironically, the VHS collection still is in the bottom of a hutch, and it's still in alphabetical order, courtesy of Heather.
Yep.
And they're all rewound, courtesy of Heather. But no, they're all there. I think they'll probably remain there for all of time.
And all the original clamshells, by the way. Disney did those huge plastic clamshells that you probably still...
White clamshells with the covers slipped in. And, just popping that thing open, you could smell the plastic because there was so much... it was always such a joy coming over to see all of you anyways. And then as an added bonus, we had a larger collection of movies to choose from to watch. So I had to ask. But
and by the way, before you move on, their ability to, Heather and Kristin both, their ability to quote obscure lines of dialogue from Disney movies, like The Great Mouse Detective, when this one guy said, not like the line that everybody quotes, like the little weird intricate line that they personally loved and grabbed onto. That cracked me up.
Yeah, that's funny. I can't help but think some of our generation's love of all things animals has to come from the silver or another golden age of Disney and 101 Dalmatians and Lion King and all of these movies that we watched.
Kendall hates Disney. Let's talk about that.
What?
I don't hate Disney.
I'm teasing.
Just kidding.
We were having our own little...
We have this thing where it's like, I like things, but I'm not like 15 message boards deep into anything. Like my favorite movies are about here. For Corey and Dylan, and for a lot of other people, their favorite anything is way up here. And it's like Star Wars is my favorite movie franchise by far. But holy cow, I mean, I've seen them all once.
Kendall's obsessed. A lot of us obsess over things. Kendall's just obsessive things don't happen to be about anything media based.
That's sure. Yeah. Right.
It's other things. It's about the stuff you carry in your pockets. It's not about,
I care more about the stuff in my pockets than Yes,
that's what I'm saying. And that's why I love that we've gotten to know each other on this podcast. I had to bring that up because it was just such a fond memory and very large vats of mashed potatoes that your mom was great at making. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, like exactly, like cauldron's worth of mashed potatoes.
Cauldron?
Yeah, I could talk about that for a while.
Yeah, we can all get on the same page on food.
Let's talk about mashed potatoes for a while.
We go on about mashed potatoes. This is gonna be Bubba Gump shrimp.
Lumpy or creamy? Skins in, skins out.
Yeah, skins in is we call that dirty. We like our potatoes dirty.
Dirty?
Yeah.
All right. I totally steered us off track there with the anyways.
Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah,
this is what we do.
I like it. It's great.
So the Ohio State thing makes sense. So now I'm curious, why the Air Force and then why back to medical? So, tell us about that path a little bit.
So between undergrad and med school, like I said, the senior year of undergrad is sort of when I was leaning towards medical. I did a research internship at U.S. Army Institute of Surgical Research, which is in San Antonio, and it was medical, not vet. And that's when I sort of fell in love with the whole idea of military medicine. It's a young, healthy population. They don't come in on 50, 60 medications. They're all healthy, young people. There's a lot of really unique surgeries, stuff I wasn't going to get to see with just regular civilian medicine. So that's kind of what steered me in that direction. As far as the Air Force, I worked with a lot of guys, obviously, at the U.S. Army Institute, just kind of talking with their experiences. Some of them had actually been in a couple of branches. the overall opinion was just that the Air Force was a little more conducive to having a family, a little bit shorter deployments, a little bit more choice in where you got deployed. I mean, obviously you go where they tell you, but just a little bit more. It's smaller, a little bit tighter knit, I think, compared to like the Army's huge. There's just a ton of personnel everywhere. Whereas the Air Force, they actually downsized a few years ago, so it's a little bit tighter knit community. So again, just kind of a logical decision. We'll see how it turns out.
You've made it this far. I'm sure you're doing great. All right. Let's see. You guys got any other questions at this point? Corey, Kendall? I don't mean to keep.
No, this is great.
I want to go back to mashed potatoes. But if it's just me, we can keep going.
Oh, I can have mashed potatoes and food. Let's call it one of those breaks. So, favorite mood, you like cooking.
Hmm.
You're cooking anything that you want. You've got all the ingredients at home. You need to make anything. What are you making?
Oh, boy.
Mashed potatoes.
That's a tough one. I've been on a steak kick lately. So lately it's just been like steak, fresh herbs, and like a garlic butter sauce and just some veggies on the side, which sounds way healthier than I actually am. I live on Taco Bell, so.
See, that's how you know we're related. I can always remember lots of social media posts where I would put anything about Taco Bell and I could trust that you were going to like that post.
Absolutely.
Nobody else, I knew you would like it or could comment or whatever. Because we're fourth mealers and it is what it is. So.
Absolutely.
Since we're on the topic of social media, something that really annoys me that people do on social media is they'll share something, and when you share, you can write your own comment in the share, right? So they'll write the word hilarious, and this is my face when I read, look at, or watch their thing. Kristin posts something and I legitimately laugh. You are one of the most dry-witted, funny, sarcastic, playful, fun people, and a lot of your posts are about Taco Bell.
This is true. I'm not going to apologize for that, actually. I'm their biggest fan.
You shouldn't. And Dylan and I have often talked about like this. It's probably a bit of a mystery to us. Like, I'm privileged to get the opportunity to travel quite a bit with work, and I've had some very fancy meals at some very fancy places, and I appreciate it. And I go, oh, okay, I see what they were trying to do here. That was a very intentionally designed bite of food. And I also love a bean burrito with no onions. I don't know what that says about it.
It says that you don't like onions.
I like to think that it means that I'm well-rounded, but I know there's a lot more Taco Bell in my history than fine meals. So,
or we have an unrefined palate. Kristin, what do you think that says about us? Because I'm sure you appreciate fine cooking and good quality food, and you also love you some Taco Bell.
I'll give you a very sad story that it still upsets my parents. So they had a wedding anniversary. I don't remember what year. We drove down to Columbus. The whole idea was to go to a fancy restaurant. We ended up at a Japanese steakhouse, and I was younger. I wasn't super old yet, so I still wasn't really accustomed to like really ethnic foods beyond, again, Taco Bell. But we went to this Japanese steakhouse and all got really nice meals. It was, I don't know, $30-$40 a plate. And I tried to eat the stuff and it was just not good. My parents loved it, of course, but mine was just absolutely terrible. And I started like crying in the parking lot. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but can we please go to Taco Bell? And we did. So that was how their anniversary was ruined by yours truly.
Yeah, yours, at least your anniversary enjoyment of their meal was made better by whatever you got through the drive-thru, I'm sure. Many a fancy meal on the way home I've supplemented with a quick drive-thru, a couple tacos or burritos. And I think it's become humorous to Kendall when we would record in person. Every time I would show up to record the podcast, I'd have a bag of Taco Bell and like my cup. My large 32-ounce Taco Bell cup full of Mountain Dew. So, yeah.
I think like every week, except for like maybe one or two, like you guys would always beat me here because I had to, I have to wait for my wife to get home so I can leave the kids And and so then I get here after you guys, and like my office door is closed and locked, but they're sitting outside chowing down on Taco Bell as I walk in every week.
Yeah.
Every week it's the same thing. It's hilarious. So
Yeah.
I've gotten very used to, and the podcast is the only reason I've ever known Dylan. And so I made the joke at one point in time that, like, as far as I'm concerned, Dylan always has a Taco Bell. Like, that's just, some people walk around with their Nalgene's. Dylan walks around with a Taco Bell cup.
Is this like Psy in Duck Dynasty that he has his special cup he takes everywhere? I'm like Psy and I just have a Taco Bell cup.
Yeah.
No matter where I go. I mean, it's not far from being true. I'm just asking if that's where we are.
That's fun.
So for those of you that know the three regulars, Dylan, Kendall, and I, so Kristin's mom, our Aunt Vicky, we wouldn't see each other all the time, but we did have one annual ritual with Aunt Vicky, and that was for our birthday, she would take us to Toys R Us, where we got to pick out anything we wanted around, like, I think it was like $20 at the time, I don't remember. And she would take us to wherever we wanted to go to eat, which was inevitably Taco Bell. And sometimes based on our availability, and she would try to kill two birds with one stone, she would try to catch us in between our birthdays and do two at once. And one thing would happen every year. Money burns a hole in my pocket, so I would spend my money right away. And then I would passive aggressively try to convince Dylan to buy something that I would enjoy. So I'm like, hey, we already got that Sega Genesis game, but man, you could get this, and that'd be really cool. We'd have a lot of fun playing with it. Like, I started my sales career in those days. And the other thing would be the way that Dylan savors food. So we would both order bean burritos from Taco Bell, and Dylan would savor his, and I would scarf mine down. And so I'd be looking longingly over at him finishing his burritos because he's savored his, and he saved the best bites for last, and mine are already long gone. So I have very fond memories of the Schafer family. And I think that our dad, who does listen, and your mom would enjoy hearing us catch up a bit.
I have to ask at this point, I've got several more questions, but I've got to ask, through just the medicals or just the Air Force, do you have any funny stories, just Air Force, that you want to share?
Well, ironically, it leads back to mashed potatoes. Yes, I do.
Yes.
I kid you not.
I'm ready.
So officer training, obviously it's 5 weeks of training, but it's a big culture shock. You get off of a bus at whatever time you get in from the airport, immediately somebody starts yelling at you. It's nothing like actual boot camp. It's not all that serious, but they do like to yell just to try to intimidate you. But for the first week, first couple weeks maybe, when you go into the cafeteria, you have to do things very regimented. You have to walk a certain way. You have to make facing movements. You have to, whatever it is they tell you to do. And you only have about 5-10 minutes to eat your meal, and then you're gone. And that's a full meal. That's drink, salad, steak, whatever it is you get. You have to eat that in 10 minutes. Well, the first week I was so absolutely terrified that, I wasn't going to be able to finish my meal, that all I got was mashed potatoes. So I lost about 15 pounds in the first week just living on mashed potatoes because it was the only thing I knew I could eat in that amount of time.
Wow, I could do that.
It was not bad.
There's worse food. If you're only going to eat one thing, there's far worse foods to pick than mashed potatoes.
Yeah. Hey, that's how Matt Damon survived Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of mashed potatoes in the Schafer family, I have there's a moment where we walk in. I can't remember if it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, or whatever. There was a get-together at you guys' house, Kristin. And the cauldron that we're talking about of mashed potatoes, he was mashing it on the island. You guys had an island in your kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the biggest pots I've ever seen. And she goes, I don't think we're going to have enough. And it was just two families.
Yeah. If that's not the tale of our family during holidays, I don't know what is. Like, in movies when it's like the military and they go into the cafeteria or whatever, and there's the thing that's like this big on the counter that they're serving, like that felt like how big that pot of mashed potatoes was. And that's why it's so vivid in my mind when I think back of very fondly on you guys and your mom. making that huge, just massive thing of mashed potatoes for any holiday that we would ever come over for. And probably being like, it's like 30 pounds. I made that number up. It's like 30 pounds of potatoes, and it's gone in like 40 minutes.
That's true.
Oh man, so good. And this show, for anyone listening the first time, this show is unscripted. The fact that we just came full circle on literally mashed potatoes makes exactly why we continue to do this and get no money for it. So
Yeah. But it shows that we're getting better. We're getting better at this.
yes.
We're learning.
Do you have any other Air Force stories that you're willing to share?
Oh, I'm trying to think of some of them. At one point in the officer's training, you do kind of like this prolonged obstacle course thing. Excuse me. You have to navigate across, like you have to rappel down like a wall, and you have to go across like these bridge. And there was a disaster. Anytime that anybody got hurt or fell off of something in the middle of the obstacle course, they would blow a whistle, and you just kind of had to stop where you were and wait until they got it figured out, and then they blow the whistle and you move on again. At one point, I was on a rope over a pool of water, upside down, trying to like monkey crawl over to the platform I'm supposed to be getting to, and somebody somewhere fell off of something and they blew this whistle, and I'm like hanging upside down from this rope, and I'm not supposed to move. just hang there, it'll be fine. But whatever was wrong with this other person, it took longer than anticipated, so it ended up being about 5-10 minutes of me hanging upside down on this rope.
Oh, man.
And it's Alabama, so it's hot and you're sweaty. And eventually I just gave up. I just lost. I was like, you know what? I can't hang here anymore. I feel like a piece of laundry. So I fell down into this pool of water, got absolutely soaked. Had to do the little walk of shame back to the barracks and get changed into new camo. But that's the most vivid story I remember.
That's awesome.
All right. So, elephant in the room as we start to jump into some of the medical world and what you're doing now. Elephant in the room right now, 2 episodes ago, the title of our 49th episode was The End of the Quarantine Arc. As we kind of move out of the quarantine part of COVID-19, and we don't have to spend much time on it, but that's been your life the last however many months. And so you don't have to deep dive into anything, but I'm just curious, what's the world like right now? What's your world like right now with your colleagues and friends and people that you see on a daily basis? I'm just curious, anything that you want to share around that?
And some context before you answer, Kristin. Sorry, like selfishly, I feel like a bad cousin because I don't even know what type of doctor you are and what you do. So like that might help shape how you answer the question, because if you're general surgery versus, whatever, that might look different on how all of this has affected you. So 2-part question.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So I'm in general surgery. I'm a resident, which means I'm in training to actually be able to perform those surgeries. But so I'm not an infectious disease expert. Those are the people that have the real medical knowledge behind this sort of thing. But from a surgery standpoint, we went from doing a lot of daily elective surgeries, gallbladder surgeries, hernias, any of the cancer surgeries, colonoscopies for cancer screening. We went from doing a lot of those a day to, as soon as all this started, to just not doing anything. The only sort of surgeries we were doing were emergencies, stuff that absolutely had to go to the operating room where the patient risked dying. So it changed a lot. We went from having way too much to do to not a whole lot to do other than just sort of sit and answer floor calls. But no, just the whole environment's changed. You go from a very busy hospital where there's constantly people there, asking, how do I get to the cafeteria? How do I find, this wing of the hospital? To there's no visitors allowed now, unless it's somebody that's, dying or somebody that's having surgery that day. There's nobody around. When we come into work for the day, we have to go through, we have to get our temperature taken. You have to walk around with a mask on at all times. If it's a patient that, they're suspicious that they might have COVID or they actually have proven COVID, you have to get, almost hazmat type suit. You have all kinds of personal protective equipment on. So it's really different. We're coming out of that now. We're finally back to doing elective surgeries now, which is nice. Everybody got pretty restless there for a while, but it's slowly starting to come around. I don't know how long we'll still be expected to do the masks and all that, but it's been very different. I don't think any of us ever thought we'd live through something like that.
Yeah.
That
And
is
I know
interesting. Like I can tell you my wife is a pathologist, and she is specifically she works in the lab, at a hospital, and for her story is very similar to yours. It's there was a lot at the beginning of all of this. There's a lot of prep work for her. She was a director for the lab, and so she didn't do a lot of bench work and things, but she spent the better part of a couple weeks at the beginning of all of this learning how to do that stuff, just as a contingency plan. Not only has she not had to like go in and do that, but even, I mean, the labs are slow, or had been, and now they're starting to pick back up. That is interesting. So it's just the whole point of the flatten the curve thing was to keep a run on our hospitals from happening. And that happened to the point that a lot of hospitals were pretty slow.
Yeah, no, I know. So I'm in Toledo, and it's obviously pretty close proximity to Detroit, but I know Michigan got hit very, very hard. I have some friends that work up in hospitals in Detroit, and it was just chaos up there. So we got very lucky just being down the road on 75. We thought we were going to get hit pretty hard, and it didn't really happen.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for that. But
I think societally, I think we're going to be unpacking this for a long time, and sort of what happened and how prepared were we. Like, from your purview, in the medical profession and field, like, what do you see are changes that are going to ripple from this experience? Maybe it's a preparedness thing, maybe it's an equipment thing. Like, just how do you see this playing out over time once things resume back to normal? Like, do you see there being long-term things that we take a look at in the medical profession?
just from a surgery standpoint, I know for us, there's going to be this huge backlog of cases, you know, all these people that were supposed to have these elective surgeries that just didn't happen. And now stuff's going to be, we're still going to be catching up probably in a year or two would be my guess. Just even simple things like screening colonoscopies are just, they didn't get done. I think one positive thing is people found out just how much you can actually do via telephone and via, you know, like web meetings in terms of telemedicine. I think there will be a big push for primary care physicians to be able to do that. And I know a lot of people that had no computer expertise whatsoever before all this started, and now they're actually pretty competent at it. My mother being included, not for medicine, but she can't even turn the thing on, and now she's doing online lessons. So kudos to her. But no, I think there will definitely, and for the hospitals too, one of the problems we had and why so many elective surgeries were canceled was they were worried about having enough protective equipment that if we did get these big surges that we would have used it all for elective surgery. So I think hospital admin from now on will definitely have that sort of stuff stockpiled, be a lot more vigilant than maybe what we were before.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. I appreciate you sharing it. You know, for some people are very tired of hearing about it, and whether life is back to normal or not for everyone, we all want it to be. And so, you know, I don't want to necessarily rehash it, but this is historically relevant, and I think somebody who was living it day in and day out in your job, I think it's important that we, you know, at least ask the question. And I appreciate your insight there. So.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we can go back to funny stuff now. So I asked you about funny stories from the Air Force. Do you have any medical ones that you want to share now? Obviously not breaking your, you know, anything, any HIPAA stuff, you know, no proper names or anything like that. But anything you want to share from all your medical experiences?
Well, it seems like there's something every day that's just at least something small that you can laugh about. I mean, some of my favorite interactions are you just get these ridiculously stubborn old people that come in and, you know, they're deaf and they're trying to answer each other's questions. I remember one old lady that came in and she was trying to answer my questions, but she kept answering completely the wrong question. She couldn't hear me. And finally, her husband, he just had it and he told her to shut up. And it was just, shut up, you old woman, I'll answer the questions for you. And it's just... There's always something like that, but just some of the crazy stuff you see in the emergency department, all these crazy injuries, and I can't even think of half of the stuff that's happened.
That's fine, because I want to remain upright. So But one of the things you comment about most is people commenting on your age. And that has to be a sore spot, and like a comical, but also a little bit of a sore spot. Like, the whole young doctor thing is a trope that's been played out many times. Can you speak to that at all? Like, how does that feel? Do you feel like you're kind of callous to that now and used to it, or is it still kind of make you chuckle?
I think it's pretty funny for the most part. I mean, I do wear a headband, so I look a lot more like a high school student, and that's a problem. Is I go in a lot of times, and we don't really wear. We do have our formal white coats where we look very doctorish. I don't like to wear them just because you're flapping around like a big bat. So I always just wear like a black North Face jacket that has our program embroidered on it. But you'll go into somebody's room at 4:30 in the morning and they think you're the nurse, or they're like, "Oh, are you shadowing? Are you in high school?" No, I'm 30. But no, and it happens. So the day I graduated medical school, I went to Walmart to pick up spray paint for some sort of, I don't know, home improvement project, and they carded me. I was like, I just graduated from medical school, and you're carding me. But it happens all the time. I guess it's better to be thought younger than you are than people say, wow, you look really old and bitter and we don't want you here.
I would feel so tempted to just always respond, look, I thought Doogie Howser settled this like 20 years ago. Like, I'm brilliant. Young people can be brilliant and be doctors. Okay. I don't like drawing attention to it. Let's move along.
It's pretty funny for the most part. I don't mind it. It makes for good Facebook posts. So
it sure does. And I enjoy reading them. So thank you for sharing.
That's great. All right. So we often compare on this podcast very geeky things. I feel that very often things you don't need to compare, that you're allowed to like both. And then Corey feels strongly that he just wants to pick sides on everything.
Playfully. I don't really care.
As a defense mechanism.
There's a certain amount of entertainment value in being dramatic about some of the things that we discuss. But I want to ask you a couple that are going to be a little more rapid fire, and you can pick one or just say no opinion, and that's okay. All right. And if you guys think of other ones, go ahead and throw them in. I wasn't going to include types of potatoes, but now I think I feel. So, all right. So I know your answer on this one, but I'll ask anyways. Star Trek versus Star Wars.
I'm going to have to say Star Trek. And I know you will all disown me, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the camp that I agree that you can like both, and that's not a problem. But some other less educated people don't feel the same.
I like both.
Well, Kendall, didn't you say we were discussing Star Trek and you have a brother-in-law, a family member that's a big Trek fan? Or did I misremember? Who was it?
Well, I have a friend who's a big Trek fan. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry, Mark. My wife's brother is.
Yeah. Oh, and the wife's brother, not brother-in-law.
Right, and he, yes, he is very much in the Star Trek, yay, Star Wars sucks camp.
Yeah. Okay. See, I don't think we've done Star Trek justice on this show, but that's a different story. So,
let's do it a little more justice. Kristin, do you feel like your love of so sort of our layman's descriptors around each are that Star Wars is the more swashbuckling space adventure, and that Star Trek has a heavier focus on the science and the different cultures and races of people. So would you say that that Star Trek shaped your interest in science or things that were science-y, or are they closely related? Like, you lean that way anyway, so that's why you might lean Star Trek?
Well, as a disclaimer, I love them both. If somebody held a gun to my head and said, you must pick one or the other, I would probably pick Star Trek, but they're both amazing. I don't know, I never really thought about the science aspect being what drew me to Star Trek. I think it's just because there's an endless amount of Star Trek compared to Star Wars, and I have a very short attention span. I was like, okay, I've run out of Star Wars, now what'll I do? Oh, I'll watch Star Trek.
Yeah.
But, no, they're both great, but it definitely depends, too, on which Star Wars episodes you're talking about. That would affect my opinion greatly as well.
Well, that wasn't in my list either, but maybe we'll pick between them. Well, no, and that's, I think, something that we have discussed briefly, whether on the podcast or not. But when you're talking about, it's getting better now because you've got multiple animated series with Star Wars and then all the movies. But when you're talking Star Trek, even after the original and the animated series, Next Generation had 7 seasons, Deep Space Nine had 7 seasons, Voyager had 7 seasons. You had 21 seasons worth of content that was all the same universe that shared characters among them. And that's, times 45 minutes, times however many episodes per season. That's a very immersive universe that you can live in, quote, live in and enjoy and consume for a very, very long time. And until the new episodes of Star Wars and all the animated series, you just didn't have that much to watch. And so for people that like being immersed, it was very easy to get immersed into the Star Trek universe. And so anyways, but that's one that I had to ask right away because I knew what you would think. Okay. Marvel versus DC. Do you have a Marvel favorite characters that you like to highlight either side?
I have to say Captain America. I mean, military, it's a given.
Yeah. And yeah, he's all the things you want in a good superhero.
This is true.
And to some it might feel generic, but to any Cap lovers, it's the perfect combination. All right, iPhone versus Android.
So this is a very sad story. So I did not actually have a smartphone until about a year and a half ago. So I've got an iPhone and I love it. It's the best thing I've ever purchased. But I was having trouble with, I would be down in the emergency department with my sad little flip phone and had no service. So I would have to run outside to the ambulance bay, call whoever I needed to, run back inside. And it got very hectic. So I had a couple bosses yell at me. But yeah, no, iPhone. But that's all I've ever owned. So I have no opinion about the Android. I'm sure it works just fine.
It's a military thing. I have a brother-in-law who he's a captain in major now. In the Marines, and he does not have a smartphone, never has, and he just uses old flip phones and whatever old T-Mobile specific phones because the SIM card situation works out. Old T-Mobile phones that he can get his hands on. Like I had a phone from like when I was in high school that he used at one point in time, and that's how he rolls to this day.
Yeah. All right. PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo.
I hadn't played on any of those that you mentioned since about 6th grade, and then I've been working nights lately, and they've got a Nintendo Switch up in our little break room, and that's quite a bit of fun. But
I recommend Animal Crossing. You can go back and listen to our episode on that if you want.
I will do that.
Don't do it. It's addicting. You have patios to make even more beautiful.
Yeah. Somehow they made chores fun and the animals are adorable, so it's right up your alley. Okay, so you're texting somebody and you send a video known as a GIF or a GIF.
I call it a GIF.
Was there a hard G sound in there that I heard?
There was a hard G.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Just like the word graphic, like the first word in GIF. That's fantastic. Okay, perfect.
Just checking based on our last episode. Just checking.
GIF is a kind of peanut butter.
That's right. Let's make it very clear. I actually that's the whole list that I had, but now I feel like I need a potato. Mashed or scalloped?
Ooh, mashed.
Okay, that's the only potato one that I have. So if you guys have any more, go ahead.
Skins in or out?
Oh, out.
And do you put any sour cream in the mix?
I do. So that's what makes my mom's potatoes so magical is she puts sour cream and cream cheese.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, so you die, but you die happy.
What's the ratio of how many ounces of cream cheese and sour cream to 30 pounds of potatoes?
I can't reveal the family secret. She will fly up here on the wings of eagles from Lima and kill me if I say that.
I totally understand. Well, when you send her this episode, she can sit home and laugh that no one knows her recipe. All right, so we've talked a little about geek culture. By the way, anything that you want to add on any Marvel, DC, iPhone, anything else? Star Trek. Do you have a favorite series, by the way?
I like the original series for Star Trek, though I'm a Next Generation fan as well, and Deep Space Nine isn't bad. I have to admit I haven't seen Voyager.
Oh, it's good. I was surprised watching through Voyager how much I liked it. The first couple seasons of Deep Space Nine are bad, but once you get through those, it's very good. And I was expecting Voyager to be worse, but it was quite good. You'll have to check it out.
Hey, what's you guys' take on Picard? I heard it was kind of a flop.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen the new CBS Star Trek show. So if any listeners are watching new Discovery and Picard on CBS All Access, call into the podcast. All of our places to find it has a voicemail option. Leave a voicemail what you think of Discovery and Picard, because I haven't seen it. I'm not paying for CBS All Access, so somebody else will have to tell me if it's good, and I'll find out later. So, all right, Deep Space Nine, Next Gen original series. So, what's geek culture like in the military and in the medical world? I mean, we have a brother-in-law who talked about having his Game Boy and playing, Pokemon games while he was deployed. Are all of them a bunch of nerds? Is it just as much of a mix as you'd expect? What was your experience?
I think the majority I've met, I'd say, are nerds, both in military and in medicine. I have a very close friend within medicine that is a hardcore Star Wars fan. But I had one of my good friends from officers training as well was also into Star Wars, Star Trek. So everybody I've met's very much a nerd, if you want to call it that. But it's good that everybody has a lot in common from all over the place, but at least you can talk about something. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just as I'd expect, and we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit, that there's a lot of those things that traditionally would have been frowned upon when people are in school have become mainstream through shows like Big Bang Theory and through the Marvel Cinematic Universe and T-shirts and merchandise. And it's like all of us grew up, and all the merchandise we could have ever wanted that's nerdy Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Star Trek, Pokemon merchandise is out, and it's not nerdy to like it anymore, geeky. I forget the difference between all of those, but all of it's here, and all of us have just sort of embraced it. And so it makes it easier for everyone to talk about all the things that they're into and bond over those things. I think it's great. This is the last question that I have, and then Corey and Kendall, if you have anything, feel free. But with your background, I know one I can think of offhand. Do you have any military or medical shows that are your favorite, funny or dramatic, comedic or dramatic?
I have to admit, I cannot watch medical shows. I just can't work in medicine all day and then go home and watch more medicine. So
I don't blame you.
I freely admit I don't watch medical shows. But as far as military, it's very hard to get better than Saving Private Ryan. Not really a show, movie, but it's pretty darn good. And I know, Dylan, you also like the Pacific and Band of Brothers. Those are also excellent.
Yeah, Pacific was good. Band of Brothers was fantastic. And for the longest time, I rewatched it once every year for several years, because it's just so good. I was thinking, and I might be misremembering, that you were a big MASH fan.
I love MASH.
Okay, good.
And then Toledo's to meet, Jamie Farr, who played Klinger. It hasn't happened yet, but fingers crossed. If it ever happens, you're going to hear a ear-piercing scream, and it's me fangirling.
Because wasn't there a ton of seasons of MASH?
Yeah, I forget. I think there's upwards of 9 or 10. There's a lot.
I was thinking there was at least low double digits at least. But yeah, that's a lot of MASH, because I feel like I remember a lot of MASH posts and comments from you in the past.
Yeah.
I
do love MASH.
Mixed in with Taco Bell and outdoorsy things.
I'm very predictable. What can I say?
Well, that's not bad. It makes for good questions for the guest.
Since we're on shows, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, I think it's Wired. The Wired YouTube channel does a series of videos where they'll have actual hackers break down movie and television hacking scenes and tell you how realistic that is. They do it with the medical profession. They do it with any sort of profession or hobby or area of interest. They'll break it apart and go, no, they're just making up nonsense words in that scene. I know you don't watch medical shows, but do people talk about one that feels more true to life than others, or is there a general consensus amongst the medical community of one that's like, wow, that's too real? Like you're saying they're all too real to watch, but one that's more true to life than others?
So many people that do watch medical shows, I think people get really pretty sick of it. It's like, oh, I just did this earlier today. Why would I want to watch it again? No, actually, when you watch most of them, there's a lot of flaws. I think the funniest part for me is when you watch shows and they're doing compressions and you just see somebody's hands on the chest and they're barely moving at all, and somehow the person just boom, they pop back and they're alive. But no, I mean, when you do actual compressions, you're like inches into the person's chest, you're breaking ribs, and obviously you can't do that on an actor as much as you would like to on some of them. But
That's interesting.
Great question. I don't have anything else. Kendall, you got anything?
So when you're stirring stuff into the mashed potatoes, how do you feel about, do you have an importance on adding color like chives or parsley or anything like that? Is that?
I think that is an excellent question. So
You didn't say that about any of the other questions, just saying.
No.
I'm going to say it at the end how excellent they all were. Don't rush me. No, so my mom actually does a variation on the potatoes where she does twice baked mashed potatoes. So it's sort of the base of the other ones, but then she adds in cheddar cheese, chives, sometimes bacon bits, and it takes it to a whole new level.
That sounds amazing.
And is there a level of lumpiness that you want to, you want it to stay at the right level of lumpy? Like if they're too creamy, it almost defeats, you need a little texture, right?
This is true. We don't want baby food, so just a little bit of texture, but not like giant hunks of potato.
Right.
I wish I wasn't laughing as much for anyone listening in another part of the country or world to go, is this seriously what people in the middle of the U.S. talk about?
Yes.
Like, no. There's lots of potatoes, beans, and corn around here, and lots of beef and pork. So you get real, real good at talking about those things and eating them.
In a variety of ways.
In a variety of ways. Yes, that's accurate. Well, unless you guys have anything else, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Before we close, though, I just want to open it to Kristin and just anything she wants to talk about or final comments or whatever before we wrap. I feel like we've drilled you the whole time, and I want to give us a little free space at the end.
That's what I was going to say, but fine.
Okay, sorry.
Well, I confess I haven't listened to all you guys' episodes. I listened to bits and pieces here and there, but I mean, what are you guys up to these days? Like, what are the big plans for the upcoming month?
Upcoming month, wow.
No plans, gotcha.
There's a lot of faith in us to think that we have a whole month planned out.
No, I think
a pandemic, got it.
I think a lot of it is that we don't know, right? Like we don't know how much of our next month we'll be able to shape and how much we won't. We just found out, so we have a favorite vacation spot, Topsail Island, North Carolina, that we like to go to. And we just found out from them that the condo's still open. We were kind of like, is it going to remain available? So we leave on, by the time this episode comes out, we leave on Saturday to go down there for a week. And we're looking forward to that. I think the pool's going to be closed. I think you'll socially, you'll stay distant on the beach. But Sherry said, do you still want to go if we can't even go in the pool and we can't like do certain things or certain restaurants won't be open? And I said, I would rather be on the third story of our condo looking out over the ocean than in my office. So yes, we're still going. And I'll brave whatever convenience stores and gas stations we have to on the way. But yeah, so we're heading to Topsail Island.
Nice.
Yeah, I have significantly less interesting things to say, but continue to work from home. I work at a tech startup in Columbus, and we're working from home until further notice, and I have been since March 13th. So I'm going to keep working from home because my whole job, all I need is my MacBook and my phone. So I don't need anything else to do my job. So I can pretty much do it wherever. But we're trying to be responsible social distancers, and we're looking forward to things opening up and at least seeing some more family this summer. So not a whole lot else going on. I think we're trying to do this as responsibly as possible and without going too far the other way and making ourselves go crazy. So that's it. And I think we infrequently, but still sometimes talk about our kiddos, and Corey's 3 and Kendall has 3 and I have 1. And from my angle, all of us are doing good. So it's a lot of fun doing this show with these guys and getting to have folks come on. If Spotify happens to be listening, then we have months worth of great show ideas that
we'll take one of those $100 million deals. Yeah,
we would happily sell to your platform because we've got gold, Jerry, gold for months. So I just thought I would throw that out there in case anyone at Spotify is listening.
Kendall, before you tell us what you and Daniel Bryan are going to do for the next month, do you want to explain what Dylan just said for those who aren't familiar with the Joe Rogan deal that just happened?
So Joe Rogan, whom 2 out of 3 of us adore, he's by far like the most prolific podcaster in the world. His YouTube podcast is the biggest thing on YouTube as well. He has recently signed a deal of which people are guessing at this point. Details haven't really been released, but the numbers that are getting thrown around is $100 million for an exclusive contract to Spotify, which is huge. That means that the single biggest podcast in the world is no longer going to be on iTunes. It's only going to be on Spotify. So like for those of you with Google or Stitcher or iTunes, like you will no longer have access to Joe Rogan unless you download the Spotify app. Same thing for YouTube, which is a big deal. And I mean, I don't even know. I was completely unaware that Spotify even did videos. Like it seems to me that like this is something that they're trying to roll out with Joe Rogan. But yeah, JRE, Joe Rogan Experience is also coming off of YouTube, and that's also going to be exclusive to Spotify.
And what happened with their stock within minutes? With it,
so this news was released at 2:30, and like at like 2:35, their stock like doubled. It's insane. So Spotify it's good news for us, I think, because Spotify is putting big money on the podcast surge that like we've seen a lot of people getting into podcasts for the first time in recent years, and that has grown steadily, and at least Spotify seems to think that it's going to surge even further and for longer. So it means good things for us. And it gets Joe Rogan out of our way on iTunes.
That's right.
That was the only thing holding us back. So
that was the last thing we needed to remove, the last obstacle for sure. Kendall, do you have plans over the next month?
No, I think the same as a lot of other people, just kind of wait and see. So we're starting to talk with the church. Like we're starting talks about what's it going to look like, and what's a timetable going to look like when we start rolling back into the building, and when and if, and then how. And so, I mean, all of that stuff is just going to be, things are going to change, and we have to expect them to change. And any plans that we make are tentative at best.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Well, Kristin, Dylan and I were talking to your dad at Hot Chicken Takeover. This has been what, Dylan, 3-4 months ago? About this podcast, and
I still worked at Fruit Corporation, so Fruit Inc. So it's been almost a year.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Anyway, we were telling him about our idea and where we were with starting this burgeoning little podcast that is now 51 episodes deep, and I didn't think we knew or we had any idea that we would have you on, but this has been a treat. It's been good to catch up with you and just get a different perspective. We love having guests, and you broke the female barrier in our podcast. You're our first female guest, so
oh wow,
it's awesome. So
yeah, somebody asked about that, and I said, yeah, none of them will return our calls. We've only had guys so far because
we're creepy when we leave voicemails for for females apparently. So we had to go with family in order to get them on the podcast because, you know, she knows us and trusts us. And so it's all good. So this has been really fun. It's great to catch up, and thank you for allowing us to do it in a little bit more of a public format. And you have an interesting story and an interesting background, and you know, you're a little bit of a geek like us. And so it was just fun to be able to have you on and talk about some and all of those things. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and nice meeting Kendall, and no, it's been fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. This has been episode number 51. Please follow us on all of the social media channels at From the Mid Pod. We have a Facebook group now that has over 100 members and growing. And we have every intention to do at least another 49. So thanks for listening. Thank you, Dr. Schafer, for your time. And we'll talk to you all soon.